Welcome to Lecture 11 in our series on medical law and professional ethics. We are skipping Lecture 10 for now. It's going to be a placeholder where I will fill that in at some point with health information technology, but it's not built into the rest of the course yet. In this lecture, we're going to be talking about genetics and drugs. We'll be describing the laws and ethics related to genetic technology research and testing, explain the process and legal issues related to drug development and approval, identify the agency responsible for regulating medical devices, and explain how innovations are protected through legal pathways. So the Human Genome Project was an international collaborative project to determine all of the genes in the human body, study and identify each of them. And that's something that's since been completed and is kind of the foundation of the modern field of genetics, which is the field of biology that deals with the study of heredity and gene variation. The field of genetics covers all different topics. Genetic engineering is the process of manually adding DNA to an organism or modifying its DNA. And the goal is to add or create new traits that are not already found in that organism. It's also used to produce human chemicals, for example, pigs being genetically engineered to produce insulin for humans. Then there's cloning, which is the process of replicating all of the genes of one organism to create an identical copy of it. There's gene mapping, which is the identification of the sequence and location of specific genes inside the chromosomes of cells. This is made possible by the Human Genome Project, and the blueprints for human beings make it possible to detect and perhaps in the future even correct defective genes that might lead to poor health through a process called gene therapy. And gene therapy entails splicing a needed gene into the body of cells that are still in their infancy. This is adding genes to cells that are already alive. These are all kind of the cutting edge of modern medicine. The near future is hopefully when we'll be seeing all the effects of gene therapy and gene mapping. The development of genetic testing has raised some issues about the possibility of employment discrimination or restricting access to health insurance based on genetic information. There's also legal and ethical challenges that come with who has the right to receive gene therapy. How much will the treatment cost? How much should it cost? Are there limitations on what can or should be done? Is it ethical to alter someone's genes? Is it ethical to control the genes of the entire human population? These are all fascinating questions that if you are interested in, come to my office hours or send me a message about making these your discussion posts. I love genetics. It was fascinating studying it when I was in college, and so it's fun to get to revisit it a little bit now. In 1964, the World Medical Association's Declaration of Helsinki established the first international code of ethics on genetic research. And this code prevented or prohibited most genetic engineering. It was widely accepted. And, if you think about the context of these times, just recently after World War II, where Nazi human experimentation was a huge problem, you can see why they were very quick to want to limit the ways that the boundaries could be pushed. Now, a lot of this research requires stem cells, which are unspecialized, undifferentiated cells or tissue that can become one or more different types of specialized cells. And the big ethical issue here, or ethical debate, comes from the fact that frozen embryos are the main source of stem cells. So there have been federal and state laws related to stem cell research that have been enacted. But in 2009, President Obama signed an executive order repealing a previous policy that limited federal tax dollars for embryonic stem cell research. And in 2013, the Supreme Court rejected an appeal to stop federal funding. So this is something that has been more accessible over the past decade than the previous one, but it still remains controversial. Then in 2008, there was also the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, which prevents employers and insurance companies from discriminating against individuals based on information found in genetic tests. All right, so next we're going to go into drugs and drug development, which is regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. It's one of their key responsibilities to regulate the safety and effectiveness of drugs sold in the United States. Once a drug has been approved, the FDA continues to monitor its safety and effectiveness as long as it's on the market. And getting that approval is a lengthy process. Receiving approval for a new drug is a lengthy process. There's three parts of the application process, and then there are 3 phases of clinical trials. It starts off, let me see if I can put the infographic on. It starts off when a new drug is developed and an investigational new drug application or IND form is submitted. This is a form that describes what will happen with human tests after the drug has been developed and tested on animals. Those portions are considered the preclinical part of drug development, and then it moves into the clinical drug development part, which happens in 3 phases. The first phase is typically used to determine dosage. And so what will happen is they take 20 to 80 typically healthy people and give them different amounts of the drug to figure out how much is safe to take. Next, in phase 2, the emphasis is on effectiveness. And in this phase, they give the drug to hundreds of different patients, and they compare the effectiveness of the drug against a placebo or a competing drug. And then finally, phase 3 is where they're trying to enroll as many people as they can to use the drug exactly how they want and ideally get the biggest benefit they can. After the clinical trials are complete, it goes on to an NDA review where the drug developer will meet with the FDA. They will submit an NDA application, which is a new drug application. It'll be reviewed by the FDA, and then they will discuss drug labeling. They'll inspect the facility where the drugs will be manufactured, and then they will move into the post-approval risk assessment system. When the FDA reviews a new drug application, it has 3 major concerns in mind. It evaluates the safety and effectiveness of the drug related to the proposed use. It ensures that the proposed labeling is appropriate, and it determines whether the drug lives up to the manufacturer's proposed strength, quality, and identity. At each step in the process, there are specific regulations and requirements, and these are detailed in the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which was passed to assure consumers that foods are pure and wholesome, safe to eat, and produced under sanitary conditions, and the same with drugs and medical devices. The main consumer watchdog in this system is the FDA's Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, and their best known job is to evaluate new drugs before they can be sold. They ensure that drugs, both brand name and generic, work correctly and that their health benefits outweigh their known risks. Similar to drugs, we also have strict regulation for medical devices from the FDA's Center for Devices and Radiological Health. Devices are classified as either Class 1, 2, or 3, and Class 3 devices receive more regulatory control than Class 2 more than Class 1. The basic requirements for manufacturers of medical devices are related to labeling, registration, packaging, and reporting malfunctions. Medical device law also includes health technology, which is an evolving area, and the FDA has moved to regulate certain mobile apps that deal with health information, specifically when the functionality of the device could pose a risk to patient safety if it doesn't function as intended. So if a mobile device is being used as a medical device, it falls under the classifications of the FDA. And the last section that we'll address in this lecture on genetics and drugs is actually about intellectual property, which is a driving force behind drug and device development. Intellectual property are creations of the mind, of the intellect that are protected by law, enabling people to earn recognition or financial benefit from what they create or invent. So let's say I create or invent a new process for manufacturing a certain drug. I could then take that intellectual property and get a patent for it. A patent is a grant made by the government that gives the creator of an invention the sole right to make, use, or sell that invention. So I could then patent that process and use that process to sell the drug for cheaper than the current manufacturer and try and make a ton of money. It's through that process that I have an inherent incentive to try and develop new drugs, develop better drugs, better treatments, because there's low-hanging fruit out there for people to go develop these drugs and treatments and to make money by offering something better than we have on the market today. That's very similar to a trademark, but a trademark is a word, name, symbol, phrase, or other device used to promote a product or service. So, for example, a company might trademark their slogan, whereas they would put a patent on the way they produce a specific product. Patent law is handled only at the federal level in the United States, and that's a big deal, so you know that patents are universal despite what state you're in. It's the same in every state in the United States. They generally provide the exclusive use of a design for 14 or 15 years. Patents protect the underlying product, whereas trademarks do not protect the underlying product. They just protect symbols and things that are used for commerce. Generally, trademarks have to be registered, renewed after 5 years, and then subsequently after every 10 years. And so having this system allows people to benefit from the work that they put in to invent, discover, or create. This is what allows the engine of discovery to keep moving forward for us in the medical field. As long as there are people interested in looking for new processes, there will always be new creative ways people can find to improve the products we're providing and the care we deliver. So that's it for our lecture on genetics and drugs. I will see you next time for will probably be one of the more in-depth lectures that we have on the complexity of facility administration, where I'll also be tying in federal and state statutes. So I'm really looking forward to that one. I hope you are too. I will see you then.